the original series finale, When the Saints Go Marching In. So it took me a minute to finally sit down and do this review. I did end up watching it. It was like Thursday or Friday. It took me a minute to just sit down because I was gone all weekend. And it's interesting, I kind of been sitting with a little. I just watched like the full trailer, like not the one they had on TV, but like the full Comic-Con trailer for the Legacy series. So I didn't even watch that last week. Like I just did it before starting this. And it was interesting. So of course I'll save that for like the very end of my review and some of the weird stuff that I saw in that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But we'll get to that later. As far as the finale goes, I enjoyed it myself. I know a lot of people were upset with it, with kind of deaths and things. Like for me personally, my thing that I didn't like was Josh getting killed. But in this, I thought it was pretty interesting to watch, and it was like, okay, well, once Klaus took the power, I was like, well, they're not gonna find a way to do it. Like we knew Hope wasn't gonna die, and that was before I knew there was gonna be a spinoff. I'm like, they're not gonna kill Hope. So, of course, Klaus takes the power, and it was like, all right, well, if he takes it, they're not gonna find that magic solution in the final episode. Like this is that moment where they reference it, in the episode before this. Like of course there is a solution, but it's buried in some ancient city, a million, 1,000 leagues, 10,000 leagues under the sea type stuff. So I was like, all right, well he's gonna take the power, and that's pretty much gonna be it, and that is definitely the case. And then of course things start to shift a little bit, and it's like, all right, well Elijah takes on a little bit of the power to give Klaus clarity. It allows for him to have some clarity, and it allows for him to kind of have his final day with his family and embrace them and stuff like that. So of course everybody makes their return to the city, and he has all his siblings with him, and they stand around, and it's like they have their little arguments in the beginning, but of course everything kind of comes together by the end of the episode. And I like the way it was handled personally. Like I said, I actually really enjoyed this episode, and them going through and having these moments, especially for Klaus, where like the whole point of his character basically is to be the guy who says he hates everybody, but his main thing is that he wants to be loved and that he loves everybody else. So he does actually admit that stuff, like saying that to Cole, like where that was like his whole thing was like, I've never really liked Klaus, like I've never really bought into the whole family thing, like the always and forever. So I kind of liked his the little plot line they threw in there for him, and then how he it's like, all right, if it's gonna be for real, Klaus's last moment, or is like, he even says like he's died like 100 billion times, like he's gonna get out of it, and then it's like, all right, I'll be with him, and so that's he goes back to be with the family in that final moment. So I thought that was pretty cool. Everything else that they did, them talking about some of their crazier moments with Klaus, which I thought was pretty funny, but it was entertaining, and I like the way it was handled. And then they go through, and it's calm. It's some sad stuff here and there. We have something that I assume is going to come up in the Legacy series, but Vincent being asked to be the father of Freya and Keelan's baby. So I thought that was interesting. It's like, okay, that's one of those plot lines that definitely has to show up. I would assume the kid from the trailer is probably going to be that kid, because it's supposed to be like years later. It's super confusing. Once again, I'll talk about that later, but I was like, okay, that's very interesting, and I'm curious to see how that's gonna ultimately end up playing out. So I'm excited for that. But the way the whole story was handled, I thought was nice. It was a nice little, it was basically just an emotional episode. Like, all right, this is some of the stuff they've gone through. Caroline comes in, has her moment with Klaus, and it was like, okay, that's that's kind of been built up for a super long time, and that was like that final moment of that. So I thought that was pretty nice to have that in the episode. And then they go through, and it's like, all right, we do our wish burning ceremony. Klaus has his moment with his daughter, and that's when Elijah says we need to discuss something else, which we find out later is that he intends to sacrifice himself alongside his brother. And it's like that's kind of been his whole thing. Like his whole character is basically defined as his brother's keeper. Like that is pretty much it, and he sticks to that even in the very end. And I was like, well, that's a heck of a twist. I know some people didn't enjoy that. I thought it was actually kind of cool because it was just one of those crazy things where it's like, I just wouldn't expect that. I would prefer if it wasn't that way, because admittedly I do like Elijah more than I like Klaus. I just always thought he was a cooler character, but I like that idea. I like the way it was handled, and them having that moment where Klaus kind of realizes like my brother's gonna end his own life, and he doesn't have to, but he's going to end his life with me. And they have the other emotional stuff. The vampires are all leaving the city. Marcel has tickets for everybody to take off. He is actually going to marry Rebecca, who is also going to be getting a cure, which also may or may not show up in the Legacy series, depending on how they decide to change things around a little. But she ultimately proposes to him, and he of course agrees. So they are officially together, and they'll pop up somewhere. It's a spinoff; they have to show up. So I was like, all right, that's interesting. Vampires leaving the city is very interesting. I feel like that in itself, I feel, is entertaining enough just to be like, what happens next, with that. So I kind of hope we get some of that in the Legacy series, just because I'm curious what that would even mean for so many of the characters. Like, the vampires are gone. It just leaves, humans, witches, and werewolves, and it's like, well, I would assume they would get along, but that may or may not be 100% true. So it's like I hope we get something out of that, because that just seems like a cool idea. Like, after all this time, it's like, all right, everybody take off, and it's the end of the series, so there's nobody arguing. Everyone's just like, cool, like, we're just gonna leave our entire lives and just take off because you said so. But if he can rip your head off, then you kind of have to do what he says. But it was interesting. I was like, all right, I'm excited to see some of these little plot elements come back in the future, considering I know they will. But of course, we get to the end, and Klaus and Elijah sacrifice themselves. It was an interesting moment just watching that, where it's like, wow, after all this stuff that they've gone through, of course, Always and Forever, them being like the villains in the Vampire Diaries, anti-heroes. I guess it stops there. I can't really say full-on heroes. I feel like they've never really been the good guys. But they fluctuated as far as anti-hero to just full-on villain. So after all that, it comes down to, we know Klaus is going to die, and then Elijah still sticking to that element of being the big brother. He is the one who decides he's going to sacrifice himself, and whatever crazy journey is on the other side, whether it's darkness or not, they will face it together. And I was like, well, that's a super interesting way to do it. I thought it was really cool. Like I said, I would have been cool if it was just Klaus and Elijah actually ended up living, and that just naturally continues on, and we see how that relationship, especially with the Legacy series, how that could possibly build up with him kind of working to fully reestablish his relationship with his niece. But all in all, I still enjoyed it. It was just like, man, that's a crazy way to end it. I did not expect it. Of course, they introduced in like the last 10 minutes too, so it was just like, oh, that's like a super twist, where all this time it was like, all right, well, he's got the power, and then Elijah just basically gives him back the rest of the madness, and then it's that's pretty much it. But excuse me, they go out together, and I like the way they did it, because I thought they were just gonna like impale themselves on the bench, but they stand up, and they they kind of face each other, and then they start to like turn into embers as the camera pans up, and then that's the end. But I definitely enjoyed it. I like the series finale. Like I said, I've already read some comments. I know some people didn't enjoy it, but for me, I thought it was a good ending. I feel like there was really no other way to do it. Like, they technically took out the villains. The point of like really the last 3 episodes was just determining the emotional state of the family, like how certain characters felt, especially between Hope and Elijah, with all of that. What was going to happen to Klaus, who was going to live, who was going to die, even though I think we all knew that Hope was not going to end up dying anyway. But it was interesting. I like. I feel like I've said interesting a ton, but I thought it was. It's like it's one of those things where no words really work. I wasn't disappointed, so I don't want to use that word for sure. But no other words really work when it's a series finale. It's just like, man, it's always bittersweet. There's always something where you're like, I kind of want more of this. I kind of want more of that. I wish this a little bit. Mostly, like I said, legitimately my main thing, if I could change it, would be that Elijah would just, maybe he would be the one to kill Klaus, but he wouldn't, kill himself. And that's really it. And that's solely based on the fact that I really like Elijah, especially knowing that they're going to do another series. It's like, that really sucks, because I know he could have been in the show. And they probably had that option. They probably were like, okay, well, they thought about how they wanted to end it. And then it's like, all right, well, who wants to be in the sequel? And it's like, all right, we've both been in the show forever. So, maybe they both kind of decided that and just let it kind of move on to the next set of characters. But I'm excited for where we're headed in the, the Vampire Diaries universe, going back to Mystic Falls, of course. But it was cool. I like the ending to this, and I'm excited to see where it goes, which, of course, leads me to the Legacies trailer, which was definitely entertaining. I like the idea of it. I like them. The Mystic Falls element is just like, just a return to the norm. Because one of the funny things, I think it was in the finale, actually, I was watching it, and I was like, I just forgot. I just totally forgot. I was like, oh, why are they at Stephen and Damon's house? And I was like, oh, yeah, because their house was turned into the school. Like, for a split second, I just forgot, and I was just like, why are they at their house? And I was like, oh, it's the school. So it's kind of funny, seeing them go back. That should be fun, and watching them go through little stuff, and I'm sure they'll make their references and everything, which they did, of course, in the series as well. Like Elena's a doctor. Naturally, she doesn't show up. Little stuff like that we saw in the episode before this. But I'm excited for them headed back. The super weird part about the trailer, however, is the fact that it's clearly meant to be a time skip, and that makes no sense whatsoever to me, because that was one of the things I mentioned where I was like, I don't want to know anything. And this trailer came out weeks before the series ended, and it definitely would have spoiled some stuff. Like, and I could be wrong on my timing. It was probably only 2 weeks ago, but I feel like, because they show the stuff where she becomes the werewolf, and I'm like, that was like the last episode, and I know this trailer came out like a week, if not 2 weeks before that episode where that actually happened. So I was like, well, that would have been a big spoiler, because that would have meant she killed somebody. And then there was some other stuff, and obviously the fact that she lived, and it's like, well, that ruins the lack of suspense that there already was, where it was like, they're not gonna kill her, and then you already make you make the trailer showing that she's gonna live, and then it's like, well, that just ruins all of it. Like, there wasn't suspense to begin with, and then that just makes it totally pointless, like 100% pointless. When you add that in, where it's like, all right, well, she's in her own show, so obviously she survives. So it was kind of funny seeing that, where it's like, yep, they kind of do all that. The stuff with her kind of hanging out with the one boy who's human and everything. It's like, all right, there's cool little stuff here. And then the part that comes in that's super weird, like I mentioned, is the time skip stuff. So it's supposed to be this time skip that I don't know what the deal is supposed to be. I mean, it makes sense for her character, because I guess she's like, the tribrid or whatever they call it, like the new name they made up. And it's like, okay, sure, she would age super duper slow. Like, technically at this point she's still human, because she hasn't like actually died and officially become a vampire. So it's the weird magical element. She just ages super duper slow. So for her, I was like, all right, sure, that makes a ton of sense, actually. Like, and it's only a couple years, so it makes sense she would look exactly the same. What doesn't make sense is Alaric looks exactly the same. And maybe it's just because he's so cool, he just doesn't age. I don't know. But he looks the same. But his daughters look like they're in their 20s, which is the weird thing about it. Like, that would be like a 10-year time skip, because they probably weren't even teens. They were like pre-teens, like maybe 12 in the episode where Caroline's talking to them, and they're like, we want to do this and this before we make this deal. Like, these are basically our terms. And then this is like them as full-grown adults, because when I first saw it, I was just like, okay, these are some of the new characters. And then they show the scene with the girls with Alaric, and I was like, those are his daughters? Like, that's like a 10-year time gap. And that's when it started to kick in, like, all right, well, this doesn't make sense for other characters, where it's like, all right, well, like I said, when you think about it, in Hope's case, sure, magical mumbo jumbo. And then you have the human character that she talks to in the episode before this, that she, her buddy, and who she's, they to kind of give it all out in the trailer, like, she basically falls in love with him, and that's going to be the whole deal with the show, and he is going to be the guy who believes that she's a witch. Like, they even show him writing that down. So it's like, all right, well, I'm kind of excited for that, just to see how it plays out with them bringing the human element to Mystic Falls, and how they, kind of start to play around with that. That was always one of my favorite elements, was human characters finding out about this supernatural stuff. I love that in pretty much every show that is supernatural based, where it's like you have this giant supernatural community, and then you always have like one or two characters that start to find things out little by little, and it's like, all right, that's fun. Not only are they meant to represent us, who are like, well, at this point they don't represent us because we've watched 2 series on it, but they represent people kind of coming into it, and you see new perspectives of it. And I always like that element, how that starts to play out. So I'm curious about that. But of course, that character looks exactly the same, and he's human, so I'm just like, either something's happening or something's weird. So it's just, that's the oddest part about it, is that the girls are way older. And it was like, if they were a little bit older, it would make perfect sense, because like I said, they were already like preteens, but this looks like they're like basically, actors, that's how they always do it. They're always like in their 20s, but I'm like, they look like they're in their 20s, and it's like they just look way older, and it was just weird. And I was like, that seems like way too much of a skip. And then of course Alaric looks the same, which makes sense, but it was like, if they did a smaller gap compared to, like, this clearly is meant to be like a 10-year thing, or they have the most insane growth spurts as Gemini twins, I don't know, but I was just like, clearly this is a huge time skip based on what they're showing with the characters. And then the other guy that's there, I assume that that's supposed to be Vincent Keelan and Freya's son. So that was, I didn't think of that while actually watching it, but then I was like, okay, well if this is a time skip, like if it's that far, even though he looks older than 13 too, so it's probably not that character. Although they have the twins, so it could be like it's just the weirdest thing. It was like this a lot of this stuff doesn't look right with how they're doing the ages for the characters and how it's supposed to be this big thing. Like especially if it is a time skip, what has Hope been doing this whole time? Like why they talk about her like we pass out in PE and pass notes in magic class. I'm like, why is she still in school? Like how long? These lessons. It was like the weirdest thing to me. And I'm just like, just so many things didn't make sense because of that giant time skip. And I'm like, all right, they'll have to do makeup for Alaric. The other characters still look the same. Like I said, you can pass it off for Hope, but the other human guy is just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And it was just weird. And that was the weirdest thing about it, is that it's supposed to be this giant time skip. And I'm like, that's super weird. Because it seems like it's way more than 5 years to me. Like like I said, based on how the characters look, the twins, they don't look like they're like 15-year-olds. Like that one girl who's, I can't remember who was who, but the one who's like officially blonde, she looks so tall. Like she was so tall to me. I was like, she's just a full grown adult to me because she was just tall. And that has really technically nothing to do with how old you are, but she was just so tall. It's like I can't imagine her as anything other than a full grown adult because she was legitimately tall to me. And it was just funny kind of watching the trailer. I'm just like, this just doesn't fit with this time gap that they're clearly showing, like with the girls. So that was the weird thing for me. I don't know if they'll try to do some magic explanation about it in the series or whatever. I'm still looking forward to watching the show, but that's going to be that weird thing that I think legitimately we're just going to have to be like, okay, like just some stuff just won't make sense timeline wise, where it's like for whatever reason the girls are like this. Obviously if they decide to do makeup for Alaric and stuff like that, then sure, but the human character, him looking exactly the same, whoever the other guy is, which, like I said, at this point, with them doing the weird, like, super long time gap, I'm sure they'll just say he's, like, 13 or whatever, and that's, that's their kid, Vincent, Frey, and Keelan's, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch that for sure and see how they decide to explain why the characters look that way, because I'm like, that is way too much of a time gap for these characters, and then Hope is still in school, but it's supposed to be, like, even if it was only 4 or 5 years, it's like, well, she was there for her. I don't know. Maybe it really is like the X-Men. Like you're just there. Like you just there. You're just there forever, and then you're just on the team. I don't know. Maybe that's exactly what it is. Because I'm like, why is she still at the school? What could she have to learn extra outside of just there's a specific spell I need to learn? It's like outside of that, it's like what is she doing there? Why is she there for so long? So that must be it. Maybe it's just full on X-Men style. It's just like I'm here. I'm just here forever. I don't know, but that was the weird thing about the trailer. Other than that, I enjoyed it. Mystic Falls, I'm glad they're going back to it. Alaric, I've mentioned before, is my favorite character, so more Alaric is just great for me. But yeah, I'm excited to see how the show ends up turning out. I hope it lasts. I always, especially when it's like a spinoff deal, you always hope that the show kind of keeps going. But I know a lot of people are kind of super iffy about it at this point, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to give it a shot. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. Of course, it comes out in October. They're like, we're already, already going. So I'm looking forward to what we're gonna get. I would love to see another trailer. Maybe like the first 2 episodes, or maybe just the first episode, just a trailer of how things are gonna kick off and what what else is gonna be out there. Because obviously, it's not just gonna be, oh, this guy's finding out about the magical world. There's gonna be villains, so I want to know how that's gonna work. Bringing villains back, kind of like they did this season. Like this is something that happened centuries ago, and it's like, well, we're just gonna kill this dude's daughter. He's dead, so now we have to direct it towards his daughter. So looking forward to how they do the villains. In general, what they just end up doing with this show, because it's like, all right, let's see what happens with this school. So excited to watch it. Enjoyed the series finale of the originals. Of course, would love to know what you guys thought about both the original series finale, the legacy trailer, all that stuff, the originals in general, what you thought about it. Just highs and lows. I've really enjoyed this series. I think I mentioned it before. I like the originals as a whole. I like the originals more than I like the Vampire Diaries. There's some elements. Alaric is still one of my favorites. I really liked Enzo when he came into the show, especially the last 2 seasons when like him and Bonnie. I really loved that storyline with the 2 of them, and I was legitimately upset. Like when he died, I was just like, all right, that was worse than the Josh thing, where I was just like, okay, well, I would wipe my hands of this, but I like the show, so I kept watching. But they definitely had some stuff that I really enjoyed. Of course, the originals being introduced there, and then going into their own show. But love the originals. I just thought it just got more intense faster, and I think that was why I like the originals so much. When it officially became a show, it was just like, man, they just kept going with it, and I just thought it was always really intense. And I feel like this season did a good job with that too. But all in all, love the show. Looking forward to the third series in the Vampire Diaries universe. Of course, like I said, would love to know what you guys thought about the finale, what you guys thought of the originals as a whole. Are you looking forward to Legacies? Not looking forward to it? Are you like right in the middle because you're super confused like me with this weird time skip where it's like it's supposed to be clearly it's a decent chunk of time. Like the girls were obviously like I mean maybe they were teenagers. I don't know. Maybe it is only 5 years, but they looked way older. Like I don't know. I only saw them once, so I still kind of have them in my head as like the little girls. Because even when they showed up in the last episode, I was like, oh crap. But it's been like 5 years since the last season as well, or 13 years since the last season. So it's that sort of thing, which is also another comment for Alaric, where it's like the originals was always time skipping, and Alaric looked exactly the same, and it was super funny. But it's just like, hey, cool characters don't age. That's how it is. But like I said, definitely want to know what you guys thought about the series finale and what you guys are thinking about the Legacy series coming up in October. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.